on the Teacher.in webinar series. We're just waiting for another 20-25 people who are in the waiting room of this Zoom platform. We're just admitting them, and we shall be on our way. Our speaker for the day has also logged in, so well in advance, I should say. So she's been around for a while. We're all getting used to these technology platforms. I was a speaker at a platform and I got locked out. So we get our speaker in very early now. So give us just a minute. Once we reach the 500, we'll get going. We're also live on the YouTube channel of the Teacher.in, which is the Teacher.in, D-O-T-I-N. And if any of your colleagues are locked out of this room, they can watch it there. It's absolutely the same thing being simulcast. And in any case, we receive all the questions on WhatsApp. So it's the same feed and the same format on Zoom and on YouTube. So in case any of them are texting you, just tell them YouTube channel, the Teacher.in. Right, can we get going? I think we are on our 500. All right. Lovely. Audible? Someone can give me a thumbs up, Varsha? All right, good. All right, teachers, welcome. This seems to be the only classroom where no one bunks classes. We've had 500 on 500 consistently over the last couple of weeks that we've been lining up people. I think I should say we owe our gratitude and appreciation to all these wonderful educators who have joined us, taken time off to be with us. We have one such extremely passionate educator. That probably is the best phrase I would get to explain Dr. Kamala Mukunda. For many of us, as people who follow education very closely or work with education very closely, she is the author of a book we've all fondly read, remember, admired and believed, wow, how would it be if every school was like this? So she's someone who probably does not require too much of an introduction to those of us who've read her book. The title of the book itself is almost like probably a profession that I pursue. It sounds like a quizmaster's question, but a beautiful platform to probably provoke thinking. What did you ask at school today? She's now got 2 books in the same sequence. Child learning is her area of expertise. She's a PhD in that domain, and she's been a passionate teacher. In fact, she's part of a teacher-run school, which is a rarity in our country, but they do it with a great amount of passion, dedication. We're truly, truly delighted to have with us Dr. Kamala Mukunda. Thank you so much, Doctor, and welcome to you. Truly, truly appreciate you taking time off and being with us here today for all of us educators. We've also got a couple of people who've joined us today, not just from India, but we've got people today from Abu Dhabi, we've got people today from Kuwait. It's really wonderful to see a platform like this spread way beyond our human-created geographic borders, if we should say. I mean, at the end of the day, students are students and teachers are teachers. It really does not matter. And sometimes I think we draw our own compound walls and say we are here, we are there, but learning is learning. We have perhaps a topic which is so pertinent and important, even in today's environment, as a lot of us are today battling with perhaps more questions than answers in the context of the lockdown. How are our schools going to operate? How are we going to create a learning environment for our children, and so on. So while we're going to get on to learning environments for students in just a brief moment, we've got a double header for you. We managed to get Dr. Mukunda today, so we still had our Saturday open. Our opening batsman will now come in 2 weeks later because he was not keeping too well, and we sort of forced him to take rest. Bala Subramaniam sir, or Bala sir as he's fortunate or affectionately called, will be with us on 16th May. That's day after tomorrow. Yes, I'm correct. Sometimes in this lockdown, you lose track of days and dates. He will be with us on the 16th. We are on 14th today, so I'm correct. Timing remains the same, 10:30 a.m. And well, we've got a nice title to that. Bala quizzes Bala. Well, I'm evidently the small Bala in that title, and he is the luminary that I will be speaking to on the power of questioning. And I think it's a beautiful topic to follow up on today's topic. And he was delighted to see today's topic. Dr. Mukunda, I should also share with you that he sends his appreciation for your book, and he says it's a wonderful book, and he's read it multiple times. And the power of questioning is something we're going to be discussing on the 16th of May. Teachers, please note the registration for that will be open immediately after Dr. Mukunda's session. So we didn't want confusion on which session you're registering for. So the information has been sent out, but the registration will be open immediately after we close this session. So please do get on to the teacher.in, and there's a huge banner there. Click on that. It'll take you to a small form. Fill that out and you will get your invite. You're quite proficient with that. Here's the number which you would have perhaps by-hearted by now. You can WhatsApp Varsha on 761-955-0091. That is 761-955-0091. As we progress through this webinar with Dr. Mukunda, any of your questions, please WhatsApp it to this number. It comes to the same format, whether you're watching it on YouTube, because we've already got a few people who've lined up on YouTube, or you're on this platform on Zoom. The questions will be taken up after we complete the initial sequence. What we did with this session for Dr. Mukunda is we actually invited a few people to send in questions, and we wrote to people, and quite a few of them responded. So we've got a sequence of questions which we shared with Dr. Mukunda. She's picked out a few of them which she will be addressing to begin with, so that we get a flow going into the conversation. And once we've crossed that, we will take all the other questions. So we've got a technical double header with Dr. Mukunda with us today and Bala sir with us on Saturday. And as we address a topic like this, I've got someone young, passionate, but strongly believes in learning environments. Rashmi Furtado is the senior editor of the teacher.in. Many of you are familiar with her writing and to the many schools that she's visited and probably addressed your students or teachers. She's a passionate educator. She took a different path, like probably many of us, from a NIT Surathkal, where she passed out, to becoming an educator. She's another huge fan of the philosophy of what do you ask at school today, if one looks at it not just as a book title, but more as a philosophy of what we should be doing. So we've got Rashmi, who will get started with this platform and start with the questions that we have lined up for Dr. Mukunda. From there on, we will start taking your questions, but please keep WhatsApping the question. You don't necessarily have to wait for the end of the session. You could keep sending the questions, because we get about 50, 60 plus questions, sometimes even more. And it can take us time to put together what is common and put it across, which Varsha will do along with me as we cross over. So friends, time for us to welcome our speaker who's with us. We'll start with a quick word from Dr. Mukunda. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us here today. Truly, truly appreciate your time. These are trying times for all of us. the beauty of it is, whether we like it or not, I think all of us are learning. We're learning new mediums, we're learning new environments, we're learning to adapt, we are learning to cooperate, we're learning to be patient, we're learning a lot of things. So in a sense, we are all today compulsively part of new learning environments. I'd like you to react to that as a starter, and Rashmi will take it forward from there. Over to you, Dr. Mukunda.
Thanks a lot, Giri. I hope you can all hear
Your
me.
mic is on mute, Doctor. 1 second.
Okay, 1 second. Unmuted. Is it okay now?
If one of us can
She's
test
unmuted.
her mic.
We can hear her. We can hear her. Great. Yeah. She's unmuted.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, thank you so much, Giri. Lovely introduction. And it's very moving to feel that I'm actually at this moment in touch with so many fellow teachers. That's a huge feeling. So Giri, you asked me to respond to this point that we're all learners today. Yeah, I agree. I think it's come to the fore, the fact that we're all learners. But I hope we won't forget this. When this time passes, and it will, I am hoping, like everybody, that the time passes, we have to remember that we still are. I mean, this is one of the things about the human brain, is that it's been wired to be a lifelong learner. It doesn't stop when you finish with college or when you finish with your MSc or MA. It goes on learning. And that's something that it's a mindset that many of us don't have. Maybe it's an Indian mindset that that's it, I'm done now. Now I have to look after the next generation. Yes, but we also have to keep learning. So that's a very good point. Yeah, I'm also learning things about myself that I wish I didn't know. Not so nice things, but that's a separate one. Nasty sides of oneself. Okay, shall we go into the questions?
Oh, yes. Rashmi, if you could take over. Teachers, just one request. Yes. All your mics have been kept on mute so that the two speakers are heard best. If you want, especially those of you who've joined us on phones, if you want to switch off your videos, you can do that, because the audio clarity for you will increase. The bandwidth used on video, we have been now told and we understand, is higher, and it's easier to have more audio clarity. While you can watch Dr. Mukunda, your video need not be on, because we are not putting your video up here in any case. So all yours, Rashmi.
Right. Wonderful to have you with us, Mukunda. I mean, we have read your book. Your name on that book has always been on our bookshelf at our office, and we always go back to check what the book says. We have also given your book as suggestions on our website many times. We have written a lot of reviews on your books as well. So today it's actually really, really nice. Very good to have you with us here. So let me start with the first question that we have received from Mr. Vijay Rajgopal. He is the principal of Vidyaniketan Public School here in Bangalore. The first question, ma'am, is, in your acclaimed book, you refer to a maxim that teaching is at the heart of what it is to be human. How would you interpret this in a present day context?
Okay, thanks, Rashmi. Nice question. And if you don't mind, just to warm up, I'll take a long route around this question. I know that one of the things we're all looking for is some words of wisdom about how to manage today in the current situation. But I think, as I said earlier, we're going to go back to the way things are. Let's go back in a more enlightened way also. So let me talk about this, why I say that teaching is at the heart of what it is to be human. So as we all know, it's true that human beings as a species, they teach in a way that no other species does. What is this unique way of teaching that we have? So to understand that, let's remind ourselves that human beings have evolved to have a very lengthy childhood. Yeah, we're born particularly helpless, and we continue to be dependent on adults in one way or another for another, 15, 18, 21 years sometimes. And the cost of this dependence is high, but the benefit is greater. Obviously, if it's an evolved thing, the benefit must be great. What is that benefit? Okay. The benefit is that we are more adaptable to a variety of environments. If you look at a creature that's born nearly ready to meet the world, huh, it can only survive as long as the world that it's born into matches the one that its instincts are bred for, right? And if that environment is somehow changed, then it won't survive. And there are many sad examples of creatures going extinct because this is what's happening. But human beings, on the other hand, can survive in a huge variety of environments. So the years of dependency on adults actually translate into years of learning for us. So you can call us the learning species. We're born programmed to learn from our very birth. But then you'll ask, well, don't other species learn? Of course they do. If you have a dog or a cat at home, or you've seen, and of course animals learn, right? So let's actually what's unique is that we teach. That is what sets us apart. Okay. Even very young children show this urge and this understanding of what it would mean to teach. If you've seen a young child with a still younger child, you'll notice how they slow down their speech, they use their hands, they gesture a lot more. They show this instinct to teach. Now, okay, now you may say, now don't other animals teach? Yeah, in a way they do. There are nice examples of how, the mother cheetah will bring, after the initial weeks, she will bring live prey to her cubs. Why do you think she does that? She could as well swat it, kill it, and bring the meat, right? She brings live prey because that's a form of teaching that, okay, now you stun this animal and you hawks to their chicks, they will bring food to a nearby rock so that the chick can hop across to it. And then the next stage of teaching is they'll drop live prey down so that the chick can catch it and kill. And chimpanzees, they also have ways of teaching. They will leave piles of unopened nuts and a stone nearby, and they'll watch. And if the baby chimp is not using the tool properly, they'll adjust the nuts or adjust the tool, and they will teach. Okay, so animals do teach. I'd like to share this brief video now, Varsha, if you can show it. It's a dog teaching a puppy how to climb downstairs. Some of you may have seen this, it's adorable. And you can cut the video so that we can just talk over it. You could show it now?
Yes, yes, it'll be shown. Just a sec.
Look for many features of teaching that even human beings have. Okay, there are many simple things that we also do when we're teaching. Okay, so there's the puppy. It has not yet learned how to climb downstairs. Okay, here comes the teacher. You see, the first thing he or she does, this teacher, is to model it, to show this is how you do it, which is something we also use because imitation is a powerful mode of learning. Okay, seems to have worked. No, not yet. Some more imitation, modeling. There must be some kind of an encouragement in the form of body language. That also we do. Okay, now you'll see some physical nudging, encouragement in the form of, okay, and body language, lot of use of body language. Would you say there's a lot of patience, perseverance? That also we show in our teaching. Gentleness. And it's all paying off, finally. See, even at that moment, a little bit more encouragement in the form of a physical nudge. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Varsha. Yeah, so let's not say that other animals don't teach, but let's try and understand what is different about it. about human teaching is it's not restricted to these physical and literal mechanisms. It can take a very abstract form because we include language and symbolic representations. Okay, and by this, in this measure, the power of human teaching multiplies tremendously. Imagine we can learn from squiggles on sheets of paper. That's tremendous. So that multiplies our power to teach and the power to learn. And even though the teaching for us also relies on physical presence, body language, gestures, the tone of your voice, and so on, fortunately, we are capable of learning and teaching using words and symbols. And thank God, because that's what it's going to allow remote learning to take place. If not for that, this would be impossible. Yeah, so human beings are well placed to continue the learning and teaching process, although we are losing a lot. And this I don't want us to lose sight of. A remote learning context, I feel, can never ever completely replace face to face learning content. I don't know if that's just my bias because I'm a teacher and I don't want to lose my job, but I feel that it can never replace that. But meanwhile, we have to comfort ourselves that in spite of not being in each other's presence, communication can happen as it's happening today and now. A lot of learning can happen. We've lost a lot, but we can still learn. And then when we are back in school, I would say let's pay more attention to the non-verbal aspects of learning and relating and being together. Maybe we'll be more thankful about those. We'll cherish those more when we get back. I feel that we can look closely at our school teaching and learning and see how much of it could have been conducted just as well remotely, even though we are standing in front of a class. Yeah, there are aspects of our teaching that could just as well happen on a screen, and let's question those strongly and let's change that. Perhaps that's the biggest learning that this remote learning thing can give us. The other thing I would say is that teachers still have a role. So just because kids are at home, let's not forget that there's a lot that we can and should and have a responsibility for towards our students, and learn from remote systems like this how best you can do it online. There's a lot of suggestions on how to maximize the potential. I myself am making little audios, I'm making slideshows, I'm adding video only and using this kind of synchronous thing minimally actually, because it's a bit frustrating with children. But we're trying our best in all different ways. So keep up your spirits and do it. Yeah, Rashmi, we can go on to the next question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next one here is for optimal learning, an emotionally safe or a non-threatening environment is of paramount importance. Do you think in this new novel scenario of online schooling, children will learn effectively? This question is from a senior educator from Bangalore. Her name is Ms. Usha, and this is what she wants to know.
Thanks for the question, Usha. I think the last word in your question is affectively, not effectively, and that's extremely important. Affective learning is emotional learning. I'm taking your question to mean that. And yes, it is going to be very difficult because, again, for emotional expression, articulation, and learning, we have evolved to be in each other's presence. It is the close social interactions that children learn from. And in fact, in recent years, recognizing that all over the world, psychologists and educators have expressed more and more concern about social media and smartphones, right? That's been cutting down social interaction and emotional learning tremendously. That's a bigger problem than our so-called new normal, which, as I said, is temporary. It's going to pass. Yeah? All these things are replacing more holistic forms of socialization. So now here we are in this soup. We are relying on the same devices and media that we've been badnaming all these years. And we are saying now switch on your internet and learn from me. I think that's all right because this is content that we have curated for them. It's not the same as the internet. Now, I've noticed a couple of silver linings in this, which I want to share with my students, my children. There are some shy children or some who are not so popular, And I see that they are finding their voice in these new media. They are finding it easy to share with me, either on email or on the phone. I'm often on the phone with my students. They're finding it easier to open up. And I think that the remote schooling is removing some of the advantage that a confident or an extroverted child has. And that's good for a while. Let the quieter children have their space. Another possibility I'm noticing is this is a it's a good idea that I've always used to keep in touch with my more vulnerable students, the ones who are emotionally a little bit more sensitive. I have this is journaling, it's called. So we have a book that goes between the student and myself. So she or he writes something and puts it in my shelf. Then I read it when I have the time. I write back. I put it in the student's shelf, and it goes back and forth between us. There is no deadline. Days may pass and we don't write to each other. That's perfectly okay. And I'm finding that I can do that now in these times over email. I think these one-on-ones are the silver lining for me in terms of affective learning. When I have a large group of children, sometimes I can't reach, but now I can. It's a lot more work for me, but I'm finding it, I'm welcoming it because I'm finding windows into these children's lives that I didn't have, all these years. Uh, One thing, Usha, you mentioned the non threatening environment. Yes, unfortunately, many school environments do instill fear and resentment in children. And maybe this online mode is actually going to be less threatening. There is less power to instill fear. I mean, my students also, though I try very hard not to instill fear, let's face it, there is a bit of authority and there is a bit of fear. And I feel that this mode is actually going to make it harder for me to put that fear across. For one example, comparison is the most fearful tool ever invented by adults to teach children, but it's used heavily. That's going to come down in remote learning. I don't see how we can use comparison the way we used to. So there are some silver linings. There are some excellent books which are available now freely. Maybe I can collect some links, or Rashmi, you and or Giri can do this. Books that help children learn emotionally, which can be done through slide sharing. So these books are available online. They are free, and the children and us can either you can read it or you can use the audio reading that's available already. And these are books written both in India by Indian authors and also Western. They are wonderful for affective learning, and maybe we can use these. So you don't have to be the librarian or the English teacher to use these books. You can be I'm the math teacher and I'm going to use these books. We can take different roles now in our children's lives. Yeah, Rashmi.
I think we can take the book list from you and could send out the list to everybody who have registered with us. We can email it to respective kids in whatever manner they feel appropriate.
Absolutely, yeah. Sure, I'll make that answer.
Moving on to the next. Yes. Moving on to the next question here, ma'am. In your book, you speak of sensitive, critical periods of learning. Also, very young children learn best in the real world context of their homes and not in the stressful school environments. What is the right age for school admission then?
Yeah, it's a good thing that this question came because it points to a possible misunderstanding from what I have said or written. I'm not suggesting that very young children have to be at home for optimal learning. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying at all. If a preschool is well staffed and stress free and provides the child with social inputs from adults and other children, it can be an excellent learning space for a very young child. And so many parents are both working, they can't afford to be at home, and so in those cases, such a space is invaluable for a young child's cognitive and social development. So that's one misunderstanding that might have crept in, because I think I am cautioning against the opposite. I'll explain what I'm cautioning against. There's a certain worry that some parents have that if my child is not sufficiently stimulated, sent to school, really early, taught to read and write from a very young age, stimulated, given enough exposure, somehow my child will be left behind. Yeah. This is an anxiety that's growing the more things that are available out there. And I caution against that. What I am feeling, what I want to communicate is that if your child is growing up in a secure and loving home and neighborhood, space to explore, people to interact with, there are no critical windows other than this in the first few years of life that you need to worry about. That was my message. So now you're asking about the age for school admission, and I'm trying to think of a good basis to say this, because we can go by the universal norms, age 5, age 6, but I'm trying to look at some psychological basis for why we would say, say a certain age. My school we admit at age 8, but that's because we are semi-residential, and we think that it's only around age 8 that children can sleep away from home comfortably, you know. And we tell parents that you don't need to teach them anything before they come to school. If you want to, they go into a preschool, they learn reading and writing, that's fine. But they can come to us blank and we'll take care of it. Okay. So here's how I would look at it. Any school, even the most child-friendly school, will place certain key demands on the children. What are these key demands? I mean, these are not unreasonable, but they come along with the school environment. One is being able to focus on one task to the exclusion of others. Two is to be able to sustain attention over a longer period of time. The third would be to be able to resist distractions, because there are going to be other children and adults and interesting things around. Okay, resisting distraction. The fourth will be to resist one's own impulses to act, say something out of turn, so-called out of turn. Yeah, this comes in when you come to school, the notion of out of turn, or to do things that you shouldn't do. Then to remember lists of instructions, first do this, then do that, to be able to remember, short-term memory. Then to regulate the expression of your own emotions. You can't just throw a tantrum. No? You can do it at home, but then you realize at school you can't. Now, putting all these abilities together, they have a neat name. Psychologists call these executive functions, and they don't come ready-made at age 6, age 5, not even ready-made at age 11, 12, and dare I say, not even ready-made at age 18. Okay, these executive functions take time to develop. There's a particular part of the brain, certain circuits of the brain, that take all of childhood and much of adolescence to fully develop. It's a gradual process. Another problem with it is some children develop it sooner than others. So now, relatively, in a class of, say, 20, 25 children, you're going to find some children who can fulfill these norms and some who can't. Yeah? And in school, you will find that those who can, meet these demands, these are the ones that whose school life is smooth. And so school, benefits, what do you say, favors such children. And it's kind of sad that those who are still struggling with these uh, find it difficult. And remember, these abilities are not connected to how capable the child is of understanding and learning. And it's not related to their long-term memory at all. So it's like a bottleneck that has to be crossed. So, a child who's struggling with executive function will face more difficulty at school, and they can develop negative reactions to school because they're scolded more often or reminded more often. They may develop negative reactions to learning. So it's really important that starting too early with demands like this not happen. It can be very counterproductive. I would say somewhere between 6 and 8 years is ideal. But more ideal is that teachers should learn more about this developing capacity and help support its development rather than expecting it to be already there. Yeah? Yeah, Rashmi. I've written about this in my second book, so I hope it would be useful to read about.
Out or query with this question, ma'am. since you said it develops over a period of time and some kids take a little longer to develop these executive functions,
Yes.
what happens in a country like India when every class has more than 30, 40 kids? How will a teacher be able to differentiate and treat these children a little differently from the others? How will that work?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think that first the change has to happen in the teacher's mind. Expecting something versus recognizing that I have to help it develop. And I'm not actually looking for us to differentiate children according to this at all. I'm saying we should have an overall understanding of, okay, let me give a simple example. If a 15-year-old takes someone else's rubber band or takes someone else's book, we might call that stealing. But when a 5-year-old does it, we don't feel comfortable to call it stealing, right? There's a certain developmentally appropriate labeling of behavior that we have when it comes to moral behavior. We should have that even in terms of this. That's something we don't know enough about. I certainly, until I learned about it, I didn't have it. I got as irritated with a 6 or 7-year-old who was unable to wait for his turn as I would be with a 15-year-old, and that was inappropriate. So the first change I think has to happen with our understanding. We need to read more about it and understand it. I think automatically then our classroom environment can be structured to support the child who's still developing. Like you would write the instructions down rather than just say it. Yeah, when you just say it, a handful of children can remember it and follow it and carry it out. But many of them are struggling, so write it out for them or give instructions one at a time or two at a time. So it will affect the way we structure our classroom environments, and that will make a lot of difference.
Thank you, ma'am. That was one question out of turn, but I couldn't resist. Going to the next one here. This question is from Ms. Ishita. She's part of the top management of Sant Kabir School in Baroda. So, question from Baroda here. How can we build intrinsic motivation in our learning spaces to keep students interested, feel safe, and comfortable at the same time, invest in their own learning goals?
Okay, Ishita, I hope you're not hoping for some like silver bullet answer from me. This is the biggest challenge, right? Intrinsic motivation. It's the thing we all want. And I wish there were simple steps to follow that will bring it about. And as you yourself very well know, there aren't, but there's a lot that we can still do and learn about. Even in a school like the one I work in, where we make every effort to make every, learning a happy experience, we have not completely cracked this problem of intrinsic motivation. Finally, I would say the investment in learning goals that you're speaking about, it comes when a child realizes that they need to learn these things for the purposes of some future goal. That's the kind of investment that the older child has. And um, but that's not enough for a younger child or a middle school child. I don't want to trickle down the expectations of the external world to a junior school or a middle school child. So let's look at how we can do this. Now, in many cases, the joy of understanding something better, the joy of feeling your own competence increasing, translates into intrinsic motivation. And let's start with the classroom to begin with. I would say that in our school, children are almost always invested in the classroom. For those 40 minutes or 1 hour, 20 minutes, 100% engagement. Why is that? Let's even look at why is it that they're engaged there. I think it's because they are called upon to share their thoughts and questions. They are involved in their own learning, but also in the learning of their peers. I often say, I'm not sure how to explain this. Can you? So they know that they can be called upon to help each other learn. They are respected. They are respected, not worshipped or anything like that, but just respected as integral human beings. They can express their feelings. If someone's feeling a bit tired or sleepy or down, they will express it, sometimes by yawning widely, and I will take note of it. And anyway, in other words, it's a very lively and affectionate social situation. And this is exactly the kind of situation that they are going to be naturally highly motivated. They will participate in such situations. When does motivation fail? Well, the minute I've given homework, it's failing. Some of them are, happy to do homework, but many of them, when I say now you go do this at home, if they have to sit for hours alone doing schoolwork, motivation fails. So studying, doing homework. But I still wouldn't say that they're lazy or unwilling to work hard per se. Hard work in a context that makes sense to them, that has meaning for them, they will do. Their energies are drawn to other things. Yeah. So at this point, I remind them of their own long-term educational goals. I help them to schedule their time. I give them regular and constructive feedback. I make sure they are understanding what they're doing. That's extremely important. Varsha, could you just check if I have a slide for this? I might have made a slide of these points.
Yes, just a second.
Yeah. Yeah, this was my list. As I said, so when you see motivation flagging outside class, inside class, there is no excuse. It's our work to make the classroom environment participative and interactive enough that they keep their motivation going. But yes, for work that happens outside class, remind them of their goals, help them to schedule their time, cut it down into smaller chunks. Often children will say, I have so much work to do in so many subjects, I don't know where to begin, so I just don't begin at all. This is a very common refrain and it's very understandable. Help them to break it down. Give them regular and constructive feedback. Uh, and then make sure that they're understanding, because see, understanding is its own kick. Nothing can replace that excitement of I've got it, that aha feeling. That is, by the way, a powerful evolved mechanism. It, as I said earlier, we've evolved to learn. Part of that evolution is that it gives us a pleasure, a high when we have learned something. And that really works. That is there no matter which level you are. Somebody may be learning at a high level and understanding, wow, a lot. Somebody may be understanding at a more basic level, but the quality of that aha is the same for both. And we have to make that happen for them. So harness it, yeah. Uh, Other aspects of intrinsic motivation would be more like the negative. Can you cut out things like competition, comparison? I know it feels like that would work, but actually, those enhance extrinsic motivation, which becomes a replacement for intrinsic. And a lot of good research has been done in psychology to show that you take something a child is already motivated to do, like reading or drawing or something, and you provide external motivation, like you read this many books, I'll give you extra playtime. That sends a powerful message to the child that, okay, so this is work then. So I'm not supposed to enjoy this for its own sake. They are making sense of the world all the time, and providing external reinforcements for learning teaches them that learning isn't supposed to be fun on its own. So avoid things like that. Definitely avoid punishments, avoid rewards also, and the kind of praise that just builds up the child's self-esteem in a way that's not tied to what they've done. Because to say that this is a great piece of work is one thing, but to say that you are great, you're wonderful, you deserve this and that, that's a totally different thing, and that's a totally different topic, another webinar. The whole thing of building up a child's self-esteem, we don't have time for that, but yeah, you can read about it again. I've written about it. I think by cutting some of those things out, we leave room for intrinsic motivation to flower. Yeah, Rashmi.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to the next question. It's on teacher rigidity. What is your advice to schools and teachers to overcome teacher rigidity, especially when we know that the ground is constantly shifting beneath our feet and our learners and their expectations from formal schools are undergoing constant shifts? How can teachers cultivate a mindset that helps transform their vocation into something meaningful and exciting?
Did you say who? I'd like to know who. Do you have the name or no?
Also from Mr. Vijay itself, who is principal from Bangalore here.
Okay, Vijay. Actually, these are two questions that I merged into one. The rigidity question was the first, and then this mindset. I just love that, the meaningful and exciting vocation. So I merged it because they're related for me. See, your use of the word rigidity is interesting. I would agree that we teachers have a certain amount of rigidity in us. I have called it by a different name. I call it folk beliefs of teaching and learning. You see, we as teachers, we have ourselves been taught for years, 12 plus 3 plus 2 plus 4. That many years I've been sitting at the receiving end of a teacher. I've been a child, I've grown up, I've watched my friends grow up. I have unconsciously imbibed a lot of beliefs about what teaching is and what works and what doesn't. And a simple example is comparison. Enough and more research has shown me that it's harmful. Comparison doesn't aid teaching when applied, in a learning situation. But at a very deep and unconscious level, I still have this belief that that's what will work. I won't even admit it to myself or to others, but maybe it's a habit. It's a very deep belief. Yeah? And we do our B.Ed courses, however excellent the course may be, and we will attend workshops and webinars. But why doesn't the knowledge that we gain in these sessions transform us? That's where I find your word rigidity to be appropriate in a way, because it's the folk beliefs that we have are very resistant to change. I think it's because the nature of belief is that it has to hold on. Beliefs have to hold on in the face of everything else, right? Otherwise, why will it be a belief? Beliefs are not tentative, rarely. So here's my suggestion, and this is what feeds into the second question about making our life as teachers meaningful and exciting. Hey, it is meaningful and exciting. I said we're doing one of the most human jobs on earth. Hmm? I think what we need to do is become learners again. Connects to what Giri said in the beginning. We need to plug into the vast amount of resources out there that are happily discussing our profession. Okay, experts. Many of these experts are not school teachers. They haven't stood in front of a class of children in years, but they generate theories, they write articles about us, about our profession. Okay, we can learn a lot from them. I'm not saying we should be arrogant. We have a lot to learn from them, but we can learn it with a critical mind, right? Let's not just follow other people's prescriptions. Let's get behind the lists of do's and don'ts that people are giving us. And let's figure out, what are the underlying assumptions in this? Let me check those theories with what I have experienced as a teacher. And here, can I speak to school leaders now a little bit? Uh, Varsha, that slide, the next slide.
Yes.
I heard that there are many school heads also here. And a school head or a teacher could take some of these ideas, I feel, and see if it works for you. So, yeah, if you're a school head, this is how you could support your teachers. And if you're a teacher, this is how you can support yourself. Remember that you came to this work with a sense of idealism. I think all of us, one day, a button got pressed or a switch was clicked that said, okay, I really love teaching. I love children and I'm finding something meaningful in this. And along the way, there are days, of course, it becomes a job, it's a lot of work, it's a chore. But remember that you have had and you still do have that sense of excitement about teaching. That's an inner motivation. And you must build on this. Hmm? I don't think for any of us, it was just, what shall I do? Oh, I can't do this, can't do this, can't do this, I'll teach. That's a wrong stereotype about teachers, that we are doing what we're doing because we couldn't do other things. That's wrong. Please go back to your memory and find that spark that brought you to this. Now, what can a school head do for a teacher? I feel you should take a nurturing role in a hierarchical organization the authoritative role is easy to take, but you should take a nurturing role. Make time for yourself to do some research and planning, access resources for them. Next slide. Here are some practical suggestions for you. Okay, you may be already doing this, which is wonderful. Have a library just for the teachers, to which it's not only books, but it would be journals, of course, magazines, but also a folder with interesting articles and readings. Have a regular seminar where a teacher is assigned a reading to present about, so that they're taking responsibility for communicating about that point with others. Every year you can have curriculum meetings where you're bringing teachers on board to plan the year together. You can divide the school into areas of responsibility. So even a school that's hierarchically organized can divide this way, areas of responsibility, so that all teachers have a sense that they are also running the school, that they can make decisions in their spheres that make a difference. And then I would say have regular discussions on topics that don't have a clear answer. There are plenty of those in our field, especially because questions have a power. You're going to learn about this on Saturday with Bala. But questions have a power that answers don't have. So explore with them, what does it mean to be a teacher in this day and age? I want to share with you some deep mindsets that the rigidity referred to, perhaps, that may have to be challenged and changed. So can I see the next slide? What are these mindsets? I've just listed a few. I mean, you can come up with many more. Teaching is not about conveying facts and skills. It has to be about facilitating learning. Now, this word has been heavily used. We are facilitators, we are not teachers. It's something to say it and something else to feel it and to practice it, to look at a child or a classroom of children and realize that while you can convey a lot, the learning has to be done by that being. That is where it's all happening. That it's between us, but it's happening in that head. And that's a mindset that we have to change. The second one is, yeah, as a teacher, I don't have to know all the answers. I just have to be fascinated by the questions. I found this difficult initially to say, I don't know. When a student asked me something, and I had to say, I don't know, it was difficult. And let me tell you, being a maths teacher, often this happens. There's a problem. They say, Auntie, I couldn't solve this problem. Can you? And there's a little bit of a dug over here because there is a tension, that I may not be able to solve it. And many times I'm not able to. This is the same problem I'll be able to do in the evening quietly when I'm sitting at home. So there's some sense of vulnerability that we have, a good kind of vulnerability that we have to have. We shouldn't be afraid to lose our self-esteem, in the sense that uh, it's a confidence that includes the I don't know. Yeah, it's fine. So I'll be doing this problem and I'll say I'm totally stuck. Okay, so I'll work on it tonight and tell you tomorrow. Yeah, then only I feel then students will be allowed to ask questions in class. The third one, it's there on the slide. Remember that memory is not a machine that reproduces. It is an interpretive and associative device. It is completely unlike a tape recorder or a video recorder. It changes. It's much more like a wiki page. It changes things as experience adds to it. That's a mindset that can be changed. This is another important mindset about intelligence. We look at intelligence as something that has to be recognized, in others measured, rewarded. No, actually, it's something that has to be taught and developed. If we can change this mindset in India, it will be huge, huge. The next slide, Rasha. Another mindset we have is that learning spaces have to be quiet. Yeah, actually not so. Let libraries be quiet. I won't change that. Let the library be the quiet room in the school, but a classroom need not always be quiet. Of course, it has to have some sense of order and discipline, but there's a difference between that and classrooms with fingers on their lips. Okay. Then I mentioned this earlier, reward and punishment don't work for our long-term goals, but supporting student autonomy is the key to behavior change. So that's another mindset that we can change. And the last one, no, not the last, I'm sorry. The next one is mistakes. These are not a problem. A good friend of mine, Neeraja Raghavan, has written a book all about mistakes. I'll send that link also to you, Rashmi, later, because it shows how four teachers have actually used mistakes to teach. They've made mistakes a part of their curriculum. It's a beautiful book. Um, Children are not meant to copy or imitate or think within the margins of books. They are by nature more courageous in their thinking. They learn by making mistakes. This is part of the developmental stage in childhood to be braver. Adults say, no, 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 I don't know. No, actually, I think I won't do it. I'm not good. Children don't actually, they are naturally not like that. But we make them like that when we, kind of what do you say, cow them down by scolding them for their mistakes, pointing out that mistakes are a problem. Lastly, I mentioned this earlier, paying attention is not always the opposite of being distracted. I'll leave this as a bit of um, a curious sentence, and I'll ask you to read my book to understand what it means. Okay, Rashmi, I'm done with that one.
Thank you, ma'am. One last question. This is from a principal from Kuwait. She's been joining us continuously in most of our webinars. Her name is Shirley Dennis. She is the principal of the Indian Community School in Kuwait. And her question, we have many cases of COVID-19 affected people here in Kuwait. Many have lost their jobs. We conduct online classes regularly and started counseling sessions for parents and students. Request for some guidelines to our teachers and counselors so that they become a source of inspiration for students and parents.
Thank you, Shirley. Yes, this is something we are having to do. All of us teachers are having to become counselors overnight. You're right. And counseling parents as well. Usually we're used to this thing of a counselor being someone qualified, who's somehow in a position of emotional strength, somehow objective, really an outside person who can look at problems in a dispassionate way and help you find your way out. But now, here we are in this position, and we are literally in the same boat as the parents and children. We've all lost our normal lives. And, the counselor is also facing psychological stress. So maybe we can turn this to an advantage. In a way, we can really understand what the other person is going through because we are going through it ourselves. But also, each person's particular details are different. So just some very common sense things I thought of to share with you all. The first and obvious thing is that we should listen, to be non-judgmental about whatever distress someone else is going through, because having someone to listen to you with affection and with care is 90% of it. Oftentimes, I go with a problem-solving mode. Before the child has finished telling me what they're feeling, I'm there trying to solve their problems, and that I'm not listening. So the first is listening. Next, I would say, can we be informed to the extent possible about the COVID situation? Try to learn from some websites that are reliable and science-based, and then we can help our students to see that one must follow the science and not the myths. There's a lot of irrationality flying around, and it would help if we are looking at the disease rationally, the fear is less, and we can pass this on to our students. I would also say we can advise patience, because the disease is telling us don't be in a rush to have things back to normal. Okay, a few months will go by. We have this crazy notion in India of losing a year. We have to question this. It really makes no sense because I'm alive now. I can't say I'm losing 4 months. I can live, I can learn, I can be happy and peaceful now. Yeah. Another thing we can do with them is learn together about the plight of millions who are worse off than us. And maybe we can find ways to contribute to such causes. There are causes, and there are children doing very innovative things, making things at home, selling in the apartment block, raising money and sending it. so many constructive things they can do. You can advise them to keep up their exercise and walks where it's safe to do so. Take up something like reading a long novel, sketching, knitting, and minimize screen time apart from what is needed for learning. Above all, can I say my last point? Let us not be agitated or worried about the future ourselves. Then we will communicate some calm to the teacher, to the parents and children. I find that the world is changing with all this. People are thinking fundamentally differently. For instance, they're thinking differently about final exams, which used to be this high stakes monster. There are boards that are looking at it differently. uh, Colleges are looking at entrance differently. They have to, and maybe we will keep these ways, going forward. If a student or a parent has a lot of anxiety about the future, and if this anxiety is a bit narrow, can you help them open up their worldview to question what is life really all about? When faced with this disease, we are questioning our old values. Can you gently point these out? Can you widen perspective for them? Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you so much, ma'am. I think a couple of key takeaways that all of us have had is, first of all, is that what you pointed out very beautifully, that we are a learning species. And while most species are learning species, how you differentiated humans from them was very beautiful. And then moving on to executive functions, that all teachers, if I may say, not just teachers, everybody should know about this. Moving on to folk beliefs of teachers. I really like that phrase that you gave, folk beliefs of teachers. That was really helpful. And something like a folder of interesting articles for all teachers to refer to. I think that is something I'm going to implement even with my team. Even if we are not teachers, we don't go into the schools directly, but I think that's something even we would like to implement. Confidence to say I don't know, that is something very, very important. All of us need to know that. And mistakes are not a problem. That is probably another learning point for all of us. All the mistakes are actually an opportunity to learn for all of us. And lastly, being calm about our future. I think these are some of the key takeaways that all of us have had here. Well, I think we have had a lot of questions pouring in from all of our viewers on this particular meeting room and who are watching us on YouTube Live. We have a lot of viewers on YouTube Live as well. So I will now pass it on to Vasha. And okay, I think Bipin wants to say a word before we move to questions. Over to you, Bipin.
Yeah, before I go to Varsha, I've got one solid question coming for Dr. Mukunda. This is from a very leading educator, Dr. John Abraham. He's currently with a large group in Tamil Nadu. He's a wonderful educator, a geography teacher. It's perhaps how he would like to be known more than a head of an institution. Very passionate geography teacher. His question to you is, the way today, unfortunately, reputed institutions are turning from learning centers to teaching centers, come 2030, will schools exist?
Oh,
It's a tough one.
that's a tough one. I wonder if he's referring to this. I've heard these horror stories of, dummy schools where you just get your certification, but you're actually going to tuition class. Is he referring to something like that? Yeah, that frightens me too. That right. I think that we have to distinguish ourselves, di- differentiate ourselves clearly from such, um, because a teacher is a lot more in a student's life than just a math or just a language or just a science teacher. We are human beings. We are not friends in the sense of a peer can be a friend, but we are affectionate adults in their lives other than their parents. That has tremendous value. Many parents have told us that we're so happy that we have someone else to help us raise our child. That's what we are, no? So I just hope that we never get into that situation of being just tutors. I think that's what he's referring to, Giri, but I don't know what else.
Yeah, I have one more for you.
Mm.
Um, We are in a world today where we are talking about herd immunity, but the bigger problem we have in education is herd mentality. What's your advice on that?
This is not so much an education question, so I don't. Um, Herd mentality, by that, if I relate it to
I
education,
think
I
even
would
if
say,
I interpret it from education, we still seem to have this obsession with engineering, medicine. It's a herd mentality.
yeah, that's true.
Uh, if we narrow it down in that sense, what's your
Ideas, yeah, no, definitely you're right. Ideas of what will make a happy and a successful life are still a bit
yeah,
narrow. Things are opening up, though. I would say young people these days have a lot more variety in, meaningful work than I had when I was growing up. And also, I find young people aren't thinking in terms of, I will find the one thing that I love doing and I will do it for the rest of my life. I find that's very interesting. They'll say, I'll do this for a few years. It's interesting. Then I will take up something else again for a few years. It's meaningful. So I'm finding some shifts which are really nice. Uh, so I feel we are moving already away from that herd mentality. In general, alternative schooling has a much stronger voice nowadays, to the to the point that alternative ways of schooling are becoming mainstream more and more. I think many of the teachers in this session would agree with me that it's not, that line between the alternative and the mainstream is slowly blurring for the better. And I just feel like let's hasten this process, and let's spread the word. I mean, if you feel convinced that you don't need to be part of the herd, can you find ways to share it with your neighbors, with your relatives, with as many other people as you can? Hasten the change.
no, I have experienced this personally. My wife was an active teacher a couple of years ago, and one of her colleagues asked her, "Your husband is this guy who does quiz shows, right?" She said, "Yes." She said, "What does he do for a living?" So she came, so she came home and told me, "Bad scene, Giri. You got to do something with your life." We are stereotyped in that sense. We're not used to careers like this.
Yeah.
So truly appreciate. Varsha, over to you. She's got a whole host. I was watching the chat engine. It's just I think this session would be a record for most questions asked. And I think that's a
True.
good.
I'm still getting questions. I'm still buzzing here.
So I think she's trying to pick out some of them. We've got about 10 minutes. So Varsha, all yours. Go on, Varsha.
Yes. Dr. Mukunda, thanks a lot for the enlightening session. I'm finding it very difficult to pick questions here because I'm still getting more and more. And like Mr. Giri said, I'm trying to pick as many questions as possible. So let me begin with the first question that I have received. It is from Mr. Arjun Kumar Roy from Uttar Pradesh. His question is, if the digital learning is the future of education, then is there any chance for children to develop less social interaction with others? Now that this is moving forward from now.
Yeah. No, so I would say that let's not give up and think that digital learning is going to be the future. I have read there's this writer called Yuval Noah Harari who says there are three people who are going to survive the digital age: nurses and primary teachers, and one more I forgot. When I heard teachers, I was like, okay, good. And I would just extend it beyond primary school. That's all. I would say, as teachers, as I said earlier, we mean a lot more to our kids than a machine ever can. So I'm not going to give in to this digital thing lightly. I feel that we have a role, and let's distinguish ourselves as clearly as possible from a machine. I have written about this in the second book, but if I look at what a machine can do, and it's wonderful, I'm not at all putting it down. Wonderful computer learning can happen. Now I have to look at, now what can I do other than this? Luckily, there's a lot, and I will do that. I'll make sure that I'm indispensable.
This concern is from Ms. Sanjali Brahma from Jamshedpur. Her question is, in this time of virtual teaching, writing has become secondary. There's hardly any writing that is seen. So shouldn't writing be considered as a primary option, or how will things be moving forward?
Okay, so here I'm going to take a different route. It may sound contradictory, but I don't think it is. she's right that handwriting is going out of, it's going out slowly. And it is going to be more and more, not even keyboard skills, because software that recognizes your voice and converts it to print is going to become more sophisticated. And I'm going to agree that handwriting may become something like calligraphy. It's one of those things that, some people do because it's nice, it looks beautiful. I think that's okay, because that's not a fundamental thing that we're going to lose. There are a lot more fundamental things we stand to lose. The ability to write with a pen and paper, if we lose it, so be it. Uh, when pen and paper came in, you all know the story that Socrates was very worried about writing. He said, memory is going to be lost. We're going to lose the ability to think about many things at the same time. And writing is going to be a huge evil. We've had it now and it's been okay. If we lose it in favor of more digital forms, I don't think that's going to be such a big problem. Already, if you are at our school, cursive writing is gone. Cursive writing, children don't do it anymore, and we've given up on forcing it. So they are writing in legible ways, and slowly I feel in the next 5 to 10 years, it is going to be keyboard, and I would accept that. I'm not fighting that particular one.
Okay. The next question is from Ms. Maulashri. She wants to know how to handle multiple intelligences in classroom, especially online.
Again, if I could put aside the online, because that's good. Of course, in the online medium, it is possible to sing along. It is possible to do dance and exercise. It is possible to have conversations which will feed your, your interpersonal intelligence. Um, in in the classroom, I don't know how you can artificially put it all in, but in a school as a whole, we can look at it. No, a school curriculum can make sure that all of Howard Gardner's intelligences are given importance. Me, in particular, in my one class, if I try to fit everything in, it may just become a hodgepodge. I may have to have a whole class of just engaging with mathematics. That's one intelligence. That's all right. But in the year as a whole and in the school as a whole, yes, there must be art brought in. There must be, art and math can be brought together. We can do tessellations and fractals. There must be physical movement. But I'm a bit wary of approaches that say, let me learn math through movement. You can do it, but to an extent only. Finally, math has to be learned as math, and language as language, and movement as movement. So too much of mixing and trying to do everything through everything else may not work.
Thank you. This question is a little interesting and different from the rest. This teacher wants to know how teachers can inculcate the habit of observation and environmental concerns among youngsters today, as they're constantly getting disconnected from the nature and from the surroundings and focusing more on their screen and their devices.
That's such a beautiful question. Thank you, whoever asked that. I think our relationship with nature is hugely at risk because of screens, but also because of urban living in general. Children are it's less safe for them to go out and play, and trees and neighborhood parks. I don't know whether children are getting an opportunity to be outdoors as much as they could. And of course, screens are adding to this problem. I have just recently made a small module for my kids on what's outside your window. I think most homes, even in crowded city areas, there'll be at least one window from which a tree is visible. I'm sure of this. So you can make a module on learning what's visible from your window, uh, looking at a tree. There's a lot of life that's visible on a tree. If you have binoculars, then the child can look at even insect life. But it requires patience. We've got a bit used to watching National Geographic or Discovery Channel, and you watch, you turn it on, within 5 minutes the animal has come, killed its prey, eaten it, gone, everything. But actual watching requires a lot of patience. So if children can develop a sit at a window and sit for half an hour, 1 hour, write what you notice. You will be spending time waiting. That's okay. That's another dying art, no? Waiting.
This question is on similar lines of multiple intelligence. This is from Ms. Gayatri from Vadodara. She wants to know how to choose the best learning platform or method or the style, because children are different in the way they learn. How do you pick a correct learning style or a method so that all children are benefited?
Okay, this is a question with a lot can go into it. I've written one chapter on learning styles in my second book. The thing is that while children come with differences in terms of their preferences and their exposure, their background, this notion of different learning styles turns out to be a myth. I'm sorry to be saying this in one bland sentence like that, but I have done a lot of reading and research on this, and it turns out to be an attractive myth. It's one of those myths that you feel so good feeling that it's true, but it's not true. So now to address Gayatri, no, that's her name.
Yes,
To address Gayatri's question, I would say that you have to get to know each of your children in terms of their likes and dislikes and their background and their experiences. You don't have to assess learning style in the sense, try not to pigeonhole a child as this one is a visual learner, so I will provide visual input. This one is a verbal learner, so I will provide verbal. Don't do that. That can be actually harmful because then you're fixing modes for children on a basis that's very flimsy. Actually, all children have to learn in different modes. And some topics are more suited for the visual and some topics are more suited for the verbal. Okay, so look at modes as something that's in your toolbox. I will use different modes, but not to suit to each child. I hope I'm clear on that.
I have last few questions. One of them is from Ms. Nafisa from Tamil Nadu. She's the principal of a school there. She wants to know what is the apt learning environment for learners between 4 to 9 years of age, as psychologists believe and say that it is the crucial learning time for children.
Okay, I love all these questions because each one of them is referring to one of my chapters. I'm so happy because it means that these are valid questions, no? So when you say that a particular age group is crucial for learning, can I pause you there? We need to break that myth. All these ages are crucial for learning in different ways. So it is not like a window that closes at age 9, but there are uh, certain kinds of inputs that are suitable for the 4 to 9-year-old. And here again, I would say it is not necessary for you to have a lot of expensive equipment and very specialized material. There should be objects, everyday objects even, and a lot of opportunity and freedom to play and manipulate these objects, and peers with whom to play, and adults with whom to interact. Somebody who's making sure that you're not getting hurt and you're not hurting yourself and everyone's getting a chance. A lot of verbal interaction. I don't know if you've seen a child recently, you'll give them this most colorful plastic thing that has a lot of nice things, but then they want the steel lota from which you're drinking your coffee. I mean, so that's, haven't you noticed this? So I think they like the objects that we use actually. They like to explore things like that. And of course, because you're saying 4 to 9-year-old, the basic skills, reading, writing, maths, arithmetic skills, with a lot of concrete material. I'm actually not a primary school teacher, so I wouldn't like mine to be the best word on that. And your Nafisa, you will know better, and your primary school teachers will know better.
Okay. There is 3-4 questions on the same lines that I have received from multiple teachers. I'll be combining that into one. The major concern is to keep children who are distracted easily and slow learners. So how can these children be kept occupied and kept attentive in online classes now that the situation where online classes are becoming very popular? So there are distinguishing between...
Question is restricted to online classes.
Yes, during online classes, how can we cater to distracted children and to slow learners?
Is it possible for me, Giri, to say I don't know? Because I really haven't thought about this. I don't want to say something hastily which which might give a wrong impression. I think, that depending on the medium you're using, there is scope for individual attention in the online. I think. I don't know actually how to solve this problem. In class, there are many things one can do, but in an online session, I noticed that Zoom allows for chatting among children, like the note passing which happens in class. But I have learned that there's a way to disable it. So you might have to do little things like that. You might have to bring parents on board. Parents will have to help because they're sitting at home. Otherwise, how to do it? Let's just hope this thing passes. Please. We can get back to school, all of us.
Okay, this is one last question that I have to take for today. This teacher says that there are, in the current scenario, teachers are putting in a lot of extra effort and going the extra mile to help students to learn. They're preparing themselves so that they're relevant to the child. So, but students do not seem to be interested or do not hear that the teacher is giving so much attention to it. So how do you get them to pay attention or be interested in this?
So I think, are you saying that even when the teacher is putting effort, it's not being recognized or not being taken advantage of? Well, I would ask what kind of relationship that teacher has with the children, apart from the learning, apart from what you're learning together. Is there a kind of affection that's flowing between the two? Because if I felt that my student didn't appreciate the work that I had put in, I would straight out ask them. I would say, do you know, I spent an hour preparing this and you're just talking amongst yourselves. And immediately the child feels it. They do feel bad because they have affection for us and they do want to respond. And I would be as frank and honest as that. I am feeling a bit hurt and I won't hide it. I would say it. I would say, do you know that I put this? And I think children will respond. I mean, that seems like a very simplistic thing, but behind it is a lot of build-up of relationship, of affection, which can happen with good intentions over a period of time. Children also are dying to relate happily with their teachers. They don't want to have bad relationships with us. They really want our affection and they want to give affection. So let's build that. Then these things can be dealt with in that context.
So this is this is really the last question I'm going to ask. I've got this from multiple people actually.
Okay.
So they want to know how self-learning and self-improvement can happen during this time. How can that happen? Self-learning and self-improvement.
Self-learning for the teacher or for the student?
For the student.
For the student. Yeah, of course there's too much. I feel there's too much out there in terms of resources. So if you as the teacher can curate it, if you can limit it and send links rather than say, research this topic. Self-learning that is just internet homework is very, very frustrating for children. It wastes a lot of time. But if you can do the work, curate it, find a link and send a link, children can learn from very good videos out there. As the teacher, you have to preview everything that you send. Don't send anything that you haven't checked first. You can create material also. That's also possible. And then send it across. Self-learning in terms of good books that are available online now. That also. But bottom line, you curate it, you make the package and you send it. Don't leave it to kids to search for their own resources.
That is it. I think I've tried to sum up all the questions that I've received from all the teachers.
Wow, Pasha, thank you. What a job.
Well, I'm still getting questions, but yes, I think I've tried to put all of them together and put in a gist. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Mukunda, for this wonderful session. It was really interesting and enlightening. I think most of the teachers on the session today agree with me. It was really interesting where we learned a lot of new things. I think Rashmi really summed it up and gave a gist in a very clear manner. Thanks a lot for this. It was an informative session. We thank you for the time, for taking apart time from your schedule and being with us here. And for the teachers out there, this is again an announcement. We will be handing over participation certificates to all of you who've been a part of this session. Kindly note, please send us the mail to anu@greycaps.com, the same email ID from which you received your login details. Please send in the mail by tomorrow so that we make sure we compile your names and send the certificates. This session is also being recorded on YouTube and live stream. The same thing will be put up on YouTube, so you can have for teachers who have not been a part of this, who couldn't access this session, you can go online and have a look at it again. Thank you once again. Thank you, ma'am.
Rasha, one word. I want to thank all of them out there for spending this hour and a half patiently listening to me, and I hope something I said has been of some value. All of you have very busy lives, and I appreciate really. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Giri, Vasha, Rashmi.